So now you know how to run a Bing Ads campaign, and you know why you should be running a Bing Ads campaign. But this doesn't mean you're done with Bing, not by a long shot, because you can still get more out of it by thinking about SEO as well. SEO for Bing has all the same benefits over SEO for Google that Bing Ads have over AdWords. That means less competition, slightly different market, 20 to 30% of the market share. And a lot of people will know all these things and still not do anything about it, which might leave you asking why not. Well, there is one more thing to consider here, and that's just how different Google and Bing really are. Because the assumption is you can probably focus on SEO for Google and then rest assured you'll gain more exposure on Bing too. So you can put your time and effort into the biggest search engine and know it's probably helping out on Bing too. As Google still has the biggest market share, that should still be a priority. It just doesn't make sense to turn it on its head. So does this argument hold water? Just how different are Google and Bing anyway? Well, it's certainly true that a lot of your SEO practices are going to remain the same on Google and Bing. Both Google and Bing have the same end goal, and that end goal is to supply their users with beautifully made, high-quality content. Thus, they will use similar means to achieve those ends. Both look for sites with lots of backlinks, both as a way to find them and as a way to learn what they're about and whether they're held in high regard. Likewise, both will analyze the text on a site and look for the use of keywords. So writing content and building links are both activities that you should be doing, no matter which search engine you have in your site. But there are certainly some differences too. So here's the thing, you don't have to focus on Bing at all. No one is asking you to ditch your efforts on Google. That wouldn't be a smart business move. But if you understand how Bing works, then you can do a little of both. You can add in a few new techniques that you know will help your Bing ranking, or you can occasionally write a post for Bing. And this is just stuff that you should know. So let's make sure you know it. Before we look at SEO for Bing specifically, it makes sense to first look at SEO generally. Just what is SEO? How does it work? And what does it involve from a marketing perspective? Essentially, SEO means you're building your site to show up in the search results, the aforementioned SERPs. This is what we call an organic result. It gets the same overall effect as targeting a specific keyword with a Bing ad, except you aren't paying for it. Of course, this also makes it less guaranteed insofar as it might not work. SEO is a lengthy process that's based a fair bit on luck. Essentially, SEO is performed by adding lots of great content to your website so that Google and Bing can identify the topic of your site and know which searches to show your links for. This content needs to be well written so that it will look better quality than the content from other sites. At the same time, it should use subtly inserted keywords throughout the text, the headers and the HTML tags so that the search engines can index it for the keyword you're targeting. Don't overdo this though, or you'll get penalized. The other main ingredient for a successful campaign is your backlinks profile. This refers to all the links around the World Wide Web that are pointing to your site. These are good for you because Google and Bing consider them references. If a big site is willing to link to you, then it suggests that you must be a serious site in your own right. And this is another reason it's important to write high-quality content, and it's a reason that you need to think about the quality of your links as much as the quantity. At the same time, having inbound links is important because it helps Google and Bing to find you in the first place. Both search engines use robots, these are small scripts, that search the web by following links. Once you're indexed, you'll be checked regularly. Until then, though, you're relying on links. Combining PPC with SEO is a match made in heaven for a number of reasons. For starters, gaining more traffic for your site is always going to increase your visibility in the SERPs organically, because it will mean more people see your site and hopefully share it with others, thereby linking to you. This then improves your organic backlinks profile and it helps you to climb the ranks. At the same time, using PPC allows you to test out a particular keyword and see how it's likely to work for you and bring in more customers, or not. This can show you which keywords are worth putting in the work to try and rank organically for. Likewise, this also works in reverse, as we discussed earlier. You can see how your organic results are working for you and which ones are helping you to get actual customers. From there, you can see which keywords are worth spending money on. You can also use a combination of both PPC and SEO in order to cover a wider spread of keywords, thereby bringing more people to your site. Internet marketers, meet Bing. Bing, meet internet marketers. Right, with the introductions out of the way, let's get you two acquainted. Point number 1. Bing likes to take things literally. Bing is a bit like that slightly slow friend that you had in school who didn't really understand jokes. Or, to put it another way, as in AI, Bing is probably somewhere on the spectrum. Yes, taking things too literally is one of the most common criticisms leveled at Bing, and that's because it has a tendency to simply look for exact matches in the content. If you search for "I like to eat steak," then Bing will look for websites that have that phrase or something similar in the text. On the other hand, Google just looks for content about steak and about people who like to eat steak. In this way, Google shows a little more understanding and has more ability to read between the lines. Not that this is always a good thing, mind. Sometimes Google's second guessing can actually be a bit irritating and can lead to results that aren't directly related to what you're looking for. If you ask a question, for instance, then Bing will be more likely to bring up a page where someone else has asked the same question, and this can be very useful. But what it means for you is that it's still worth using some keywords. Whereas Google is much more about latent semantic indexing and writing around the subject, perhaps using some long tail keywords, Bing will still reward you for including the very basic keywords that you're trying to rank for. So try and do a little of both. You'll want to use a slightly lower link density than you used to if you want to avoid being penalized for spamming by Google, but you should still include some keywords there for Bing. Point number 2, user engagement matters. Something that Google and Bing can agree on is that user engagement matters. Except Bing is even more explicit about this, if anything, and has even coined a phrase to describe the activity they want to avoid: pogo sticking. There will be none of this, thank you very much. Pogo sticking is when a website visitor jumps from one result, clicks back, and then clicks on another. This is what they want to avoid. So if you want Bing to love you, you need to prevent your visitors from wanting to click back. This means you need to grab attention early on, and it means that you need to think about your page speed, your design, etc. Point number 3, so do click-through rates. Another similar factor that Bing also takes seriously is CTR, the click-through rate. In other words, how many people click on your link. So if they keep showing your website in their SERPs but no one ever clicks on it, this suggests your site doesn't look very interesting. All it's doing is cluttering up the page and taking up space that another site could make better use of. This is quite a clever way for Bing to check that the results coming up are relevant, or that they seem relevant in the eyes of visitors. This is interesting because it's not something that Google talks a lot about, and improving your CTR is going to involve a rather different process compared with the SEO practices you're probably used to. What improves CTR? Well, many things, but of course the title and the meta description are going to be right up there. Think about what will be interesting for someone who is searching for the key phrase that you're trying to rank for. Make sure there is a direct connection here and have all the signals pointing to the same topic. And learn how to write engaging titles and descriptions. Point number 4, social signals are big on Bing. There's some debate still as to the role of social signals on Google even now. We know for a fact that getting +1s on Google Plus will improve your Google ranking, but whether the same is true for Facebook likes is less certain. And if Facebook was central to Google's strategy, then you might ask why BuzzFeed isn't the #1 result for every search. But Bing has gone on record as saying that social signals do matter to them, and this means that you should definitely include social media marketing as part of your marketing strategy. Point number 5, crawl depth. Going back to your site content and keywords for a moment, it's also interesting to consider the difference in crawl depth for Google versus Bing. Reportedly, Bing only crawls around the first 100 kilobytes of a web page, unlike Google, which will read your whole site. This means you should aim to include your keywords more heavily in the first portion of your content compared with the rest. And this actually makes a lot of sense for Google too, but for different reasons. Google actually looks at certain key points within your content as being more important indicators than others. The first paragraph is one section that's given extra importance, as is the last paragraph and other headings. And by increasing the keyword density in your first paragraph, you can send the right signals to Bing without getting too spammy with keywords for Google. Everyone wins. This also introduces some other interesting points too. For instance, a lot of people will rely on sitemaps in order to help search engines index their site. This is one page that links every other page on the domain, and it means that once the map is indexed, Google knows where to find all future content you add. But this won't work for Bing if it's only reading the top segment of the page. If you want your sitemap to work for Bing, you need to ensure that you put pages you most want to be found right at the top. And if you're adding new content, you want to make sure that new content goes at the top of any list rather than at the bottom. Point number 6, respect your elder content. Bing believes in golden oldies. In other words, it believes that an older domain is more likely to be authoritative than a newer domain. So if you have a page that's been around for a long time, you'll find it gradually climbs up the rankings. This is one thing that's personally always put me off about Bing. Most of the research I do requires up-to-date and current answers, and that means I can't make do with posts from 2012. When I search on Bing, I'm often left wondering if anything I'm reading is relevant anymore. This is a personal preference though. As far as SEO goes, it's actually a good thing. Why? Because it means that Google is going to like fresh content and Bing will give it some love as it starts to fade. But do bear in mind that both Bing and Google prefer older domains. Of course, there are way more differences than we have time to go into in detail, so let's look at some rapid-fire differences to finish off. Bing likes keyword domains more, Google prefers brand name domains. Bing takes site authority very seriously. It likes editorial content, older domains, and established organizations. PageRank is less relevant for Google these days, and it's never been relevant for Bing. Bing likes content closely linked to a site's homepage, and it likes breadcrumbs. Another thing to take some time to learn is about Bing's spam filter, and this is how Bing decides whether or not to penalize sites that show up in its SERPs. So you need to make sure that you observe the rules that Bing recommends. This means being careful about your outbound links, only link to clean sites, don't trade links, and use Bing's webmaster tools to find out if your site's been blocked. That's right. Bing has a webmaster tools just like Google does, and it's just as useful / invaluable for marketers. And you can find this at bing.com/toolbox/webmaster. As the Alan Parsons Project sang, where do we go from here? Now you have lots of information about why Bing SEO matters, how it works, and how different it is from Google. But you also know that you need to keep focusing on Google. So what's the best way to proceed? Well, exactly as we said earlier. For the most part, you're not going to do anything that differently, but you may want to consider including a few more keywords in your opening paragraphs. Maybe show a little more love to your legacy content and perhaps reorganize your sitemap. Oh, and definitely think about your titles, your meta descriptions, and how these factors will impact on your CTR. And in doing all that, you'll be throwing Bing the occasional bone that will help you to succeed a little bit more on the second biggest search engine in the world. And this will help you start tapping into that 30% market share a bit more and hopefully improving your number of visitors. And if the Google apocalypse ever does come, at least you'll have a backup site that will still be bringing you fresh visitors and helping you to run your business. And then everyone else will find themselves wishing they paid just a little bit more attention to old number 2. Oh, and one last thing. Why not go and take a look at your current rankings on Bing right now? If you haven't looked before, then it might surprise you just how similar or different the results are. At this point, you should now have a solid idea of what Bing ads are, how they work, and most importantly, how you can get them to work for you. But there is more to creating a successful campaign. You'll find that the more you work at it, the more you learn and the more you can keep honing your strategy to create better and better ROI. And here are some more tips and tools to help you do that. Bing Webmaster Tools is an immensely useful tool for monitoring both your PPC progress and your SEO on Bing. To get started, just head over to bing.com/webmaster and sign in with your Microsoft account. That's the one that you use to log into Windows. And you'll then be redirected to this page. And from here, you can add your site by putting it into this box and clicking Add. On the next page, you'll be prompted to add some details about yourself, your name, your company name, etc. And then you'll be asked to place an XML file on your server to help Bing keep track of your site. And this will allow you to find out how your site is performing in searches. And you can combine this with your PPC metrics to get a more complete picture of your overall progress, your hits, etc., etc. Another useful tool that Bing offers is its SEO Analyzer. This is a tool that you can use to look at the SEO on your page. On-site SEO is also very important, meaning things like use of your keywords and your general coding practices, that sort of thing. It all matters. It's all very important to Bing. And this particular tool will analyze 15 different metrics, such as your H1 tags, your metadata, and more. And you can find it here at bing.com/toolbox/SEO-analyzer. Want to bring your ads further up the SERPs? Here are some fresh tips from Bing's own site. First of all, increase your ad relevance. The more directly relevant your keywords are to your landing page, the more likely Bing is to show your ads high up. Bing goes on to suggest that you try to avoid gimmicks on your landing page and to be upfront with an interesting and clear product. This will help your conversion rates too, so it's very much worthwhile. You should also showcase specific content and talk to your customers in their language to create what Bing will see as effective ads. Increase your bid. Of course, the higher you bid, the better your chances will be of ranking high up in the SERPs. And here's one not from the site. Improve your Twitter followers. Bing has a close connection with Twitter, and this has allowed a feature where it can show the number of followers you have on Twitter next to your ads. This is called a social extension, and it's another place where Bing beats AdWords. When all is said and done, the best way to learn how to make the most of Bing is simply to learn on the job. Watch your metrics over time and tweak your approach accordingly. However, all the information in this video series will ensure that you're in the best position to start an effective PPC campaign generally and an effective Bing campaign specifically. The key is to look at the end result and your ROI as opposed to just trying to get the maximum number of clicks possible. At the same time, you need to think about setting up goals and being as precise as you can with your keywords and descriptions. The other big tip: invest in Bing. Bing might not be as big as Google, but that's actually an advantage. You'll pay less and get seen more, meaning that you can bring many more visitors to your site without directly competing with the biggest players in your niche. At the same time, this way, you can give yourself a boost and start to grow your audience even with less of a budget in the bank. Then you can benefit from the surprisingly impressive unique features of Bing, including more advanced targeting, tracking, and more. And if there ever is a Google apocalypse, well, you'll be laughing.